Hidden in plain sight, a Lamborghini Sián unlike any other. This is the only surviving prototype, a car that was supposed to be destroyed, its secrets never revealed, but that's exactly what we're going to do today, as I'm lucky to be taking it for a drive here in Romania. Just wait until you see quite how many miles this car has covered. Development cars are tested, pushed to the limit, and then erased from existence, but somehow this one slipped through the cracks, and the owner has kindly invited me to share it with you. Hi guys, I'm Shmi, hello and welcome back to the channel with this Lamborghini Sián. There are some questions here. How did it survive? Why was it sold? And what are the stories contained within its panels? Today, we unlock the mystery of the Lamborghini that shouldn't exist. Welcome then to this wonderful private collection in Timisoara, Romania, that houses a pretty eclectic mix of cars, with the Lamborghini Sián taking centre stage. To explain more of today's story, let's take a step back. The Lamborghini Few-Off series of cars began in 2007 with Rebellion, a fighter jet-inspired take on the Murcielago and setting the tone to preview future design. Next up came the track-based monster that was the Sesto Elemento, sixth element, carbon fibre, before arguably the most iconic of all, Veneno, with some prototype-like styling over the Aventador platform. This continued with Centenario, to celebrate the year that would have been the company founder Ferruccio Lamborghini's 100th birthday. This was followed by Sian, and then the Countach LPI 800-4 that harked back to the original that shares the same name. Only recently, the latest model was introduced, Fenomeno. The covers were pulled back just a few months ago to present the first Few-Off on the Revuelto platform. These are all cars that push boundaries of design and future model technologies, all that I've been lucky to film to date, but today we've got something else. What is it then about this particular car that has made it worth coming all the way here to Romania to check it out and take it for a drive? Well, firstly, it's a Lamborghini Sián, it's going to be a big day, but secondly, it's a car with an amazing story, and you know how much I love a car with a story. So Lamborghini produced 63 of the Sian Coupes. That was then followed by 19 of the Roadsters. 19 and 63, unusual numbers, but 1963 is in fact the year that Lamborghini as a company had been founded over 6 decades ago, and a nod to that in the production units of this Few-Off series hypercar. However, it goes beyond that, because this is not one of the 63. Like all manufacturers, they produce launch cars, development cars, prototypes, validation cars, marketing cars, you name it, and Lamborghini is no different. But what's unusual is where this sits and the fact that it's here right now, with some details I'm going to show you a little bit later. So what came first was the pre-production, the first model that was shown, based in fact on an Aventador SVJ chassis. That was the car that was launched to the world, the car that we saw at lots of different events. But after that came 3 development prototypes. This was the first of those cars. The second was a US spec, the third another European one. But this is a car that did plenty of testing at Nardo, the kind of car that would do rigorous mileage, and just wait until you see how many it's actually done, but then, like with all manufacturers, should in theory be destroyed, should be totally eliminated and no longer exist, except this has found its way into private hands, which makes it really quite unique, and there's so much more we need to touch on. But first, we're actually about to head out somewhere, and then I'm going to show you through all of the details. The plan right now is to drive this, giving chase to the Revuelto. There are lots of lovely cars, but we're taking the Lambos today. We, of course, have the key. Let me step in, though, and get this started to show you a little bit of that process before there will be a lot more detail later of all of the specifics about this car. So sink in, of course, lift up the flap right there, press the button right below, and get ready, foot on the brake, to press it again and have the V12 start up. This is it then, Lamborghini Sián following a Revuelto here in Romania, heading at the minute to a location where there's a little bit of a meet-up, bringing the cars, bit of an event. But my first time back at the wheel of one of these bonkers things. Now, something I didn't mention is that because this was the first development prototype of a Sián, that means this was Lamborghini's first ever hybrid car. This one, not the model in general, this exact one. Now their entire lineup is hybridized, like Revuelto, like Temerario, and like the Urus, but this was the first one that they ever made, the first one ever out there in the entire world. This will be quite a significant car in the future. This is the kind of car that in years to come you will see on the lawns at the Pebble Beach Concours d'Elegance. It still wears a lot of its development and test mileage weathering, we could say. I'm going to show you more of that in a bit as well and explain a few things about it. We'll touch more on what it's like to actually drive as well, but just initially warming up, getting a small sense for it, dropping down that gearbox, being overtaken as only you can here by a Dacia Logan. Welcome to Romania. Get this then. This car, because it was the development car, actually built back at the end of 2019. It's a 2020 chassis, which is the year ahead of all of the customer cars, has on it 47,300 kilometers. That's about 29,300 miles. That has been driven and used properly. This must be the highest mileage Lamborghini Sián out there in customer hands because of all of that development driving at Nardo, doing the different testing cycles that they do with these things. And once we get to some nice open roads later, we're going to be able to unleash that engine that is properly run in. Here we are then. There are some cool cars around. Following the Revuelto in, the Speedster is ahead of us. I see a few other Lambos, Porsches. This is very random, spontaneous, but a little stop with these monsters, these raging bulls, as part of today's drive that we're off on. Let me show you some of the cars here. We've got the Sián, Revuelto, 992 cab, Technica, lovely little Mini, Alpina B3, 190SL, 280SL, and the Speedster. And then over on the other side, we've got a pair of 911s, we've got the Hurricane Evo, Merc SL, there's an Urus Escalade, a couple of interesting things about. Revuelto is running, let's get this started. Familiar sound of that V12. There's a lot of technical stuff we still need to speak about, but for the moment, we're gonna go grab some quick lunch. I can't believe how many kilometers this car has driven. It's so cool. It's a one of one, completely unique proposition. All right, pop brake off, let's go. Slow and steady wins the race when you're in something as valuable as this. And quite fun to follow what is literally its successor. You know, the Reventon back in the day previewed the Aventador. This previewed that, both in terms of the technology to an extent. The supercapacitor in here is a little bit different to the hybrid system you now find in Revuelto. What's quite fun with this, when you feed in the power and then you lift off sharply, you get these bangs going off behind you, and they are seriously loud from outside. We've got some faster roads. We're heading towards the Vineyard region near here, and we're going to find some amazing views. There we go. And then get ready for all hell to break loose driving this. It is safe to say that where we are right now is really quite beautiful. Take a look around. There are some private roads over there within the closed region that we're going to go and drive in just a moment. But before we do, we need to introduce this car, and to give it its technical full name, it is the Lamborghini Sián FKP 37. Now the name, the word Sián itself, comes from the Bolognese dialect, the local region to Lamborghini in Modena, in that part of the country, for a flash of lightning. Pretty well connected, given this was their first production hybrid vehicle. Not only that, the FKP 37, which applies to the Coupe, as the Roadster is just the Sián Roadster, stands for the late Ferdinand Piech, the chairman of the Volkswagen Group, who had recently passed at the time it was introduced, and the 37, which had been his year of birth. This car then, let's talk a little bit about it. The design, always preempting what comes next, but actually inspired as well by the Terzo Millennio that Mitja Burkhardt and the team at Centro Stile had recently presented as well. It's very futuristic compared to the regular base Aventador model. Of course, it's evolved from that. If we talk about the powertrain though, it has that 6.5 litre naturally aspirated V12. It makes 785 horsepower purely from the combustion engine and an additional 34 horsepower thanks to to the supercapacitor system for a total of 819. Now that 48-volt e-motor is actually bolted on to the 7-speed ISR gearbox. This automated manual gearbox, you've got the paddle shifters to drive it. So 720 Newton meters of torque, a permanent all-wheel drive system and setup as well. But obviously experiencing what the supercapacitor can do, as opposed to a regular hybrid system, which I'm going to touch on a little bit later as well. There are a few unique parts of this particular example. I come to the front and this lower splitter section, because in the early testing, especially at Nardo, what they discovered is that the front splitter couldn't handle the downforce at speed, so had to be reinforced. So this has a unique back end to the front splitter versus any of the other cars. I'm going to come to the interior and we will run through the interior itself, but normally on the Sián, at the base of this central screen, you would find a 1 of 63 badge right there. No badges, because of course it is the prototype. It had a bunch of updates, including new engine, new gearbox, a host of mechanical changes to of course make it possible to go and drive it effectively in some ways as a new car, but it wears a lot of the cosmetic impact that it would have had from all of those test miles. Another change is that the other cars have an embossed 63 logo, which was then added later on to those blades that you have coming up either side of the active rear wing. Another thing to note, this is actually done in coloured paint protection film. So this has blue Uranus painted PPF by Topaz to cover the original paint. What that means is that you can actually see a few marks and blemishes underneath, because the white paint of its original look is protected beneath this colourway that's been added on top afterwards. Also, there is the periscopio style roof, like the old Countach, that bleeds through towards the engine bay cover, which you unlatch using these locks. There's a key tucked right in here, which you then take, twist on each side, press, and can release and lift off that cover, although you do need 2 people to do it. Further details and things to show you in the car, then step on in, and of course this is a stripped out lightweight cabin, lots of Alcantara, but finished with details to match the exterior, and with the supercapacitor badging right behind you, letting you know exactly what's there. The Sián was also the first of the Aventador based vehicles to feature the portrait screen in the centre, incorporated from the Huracan Evo where it had been launched previously, and a complete rework to the presentation and the styling. This car also cleverly has paint protection film installed on some of these interior components from Topaz to ensure that it doesn't get scratched or damaged. Note how the steering wheel has no controls or buttons, super simple, direct, ready for the purpose. And also these components, for example the air vents, are also 3D printed, a first with Lamborghini trying new materials, new techniques and new ways of making cars, plus of course that view of the roof up above, and a very unique style for the headliner and design all around it. Nobody else around, the roads to ourselves, and a Lamborghini Sián. And I need to talk quite a lot about this car. So I'm driving at the moment in sport mode. You have Strada, your normal road going mode, like the Aventadors, Sport, where it gets louder, things get sharper, the shifts are more aggressive, and then you also have Corsa, which is very much for the racetrack. And in fact, driving on the road, you want to drive these cars in sport. They just have a bit more character without all of the, I'm going to say, over-the-top nature of Corsa that gets really firm and really aggressive. And let's be real, this already sounds pretty epic, doesn't it? Yes, it's the older automated manual gearbox as opposed to a modern dual clutch. So it takes just a moment, you fluctuate the throttle pedal just to give it a small lift, as you would in a manual car. What you have to think about is as if the computer is robotically controlling your clutch pedal. That's effectively what's going on in the background. Anyway, you then obviously have automatic. You can drive it as an auto, or you can drive it as a manual, but I would always recommend with these things to drive it as if it's a manual car. You're in control, you're choosing the gears, you're choosing when you want to upshift, downshift to enjoy it, and you have an NA V12 controlled by your right foot that even windows up sounds pretty amazing. Lower the window slightly, and mark my words, the downshift noises, the sounds as it screams up through the RPMs to nearly 9,000, it's just a monster. And if there's one thing this generation of Lamborghinis did very well, it's sound. That noise is just to die for. Now, I want to talk a little bit about seating position and comfort, because I often discussed this a little bit with Lambos. I'm not the biggest fan of them. I find the seat exceptionally firm, and this isn't even the full racing bucket seat. I find the position a little bit awkward. There's nowhere really convenient to store anything. Yes, you do have a reversing camera, you do have some tech creature comforts. This system is basically a decade old. Even though it's the newest screen, it's still linked to the much older system the car always used to have. You've got rear wheel steering and the dynamic steering as well. So electric steering doesn't give you the most real feedback of a hydraulic system, but it's okay. We'll allow it because it fits in some ways the character of the car. And just listen to this. And of course, over 800 horsepower is absolutely plenty. Wow. Those sounds. If there's one thing it does well, it's that. It sounds like an absolute raging bull. Now when the roads open up, just let the car scream, because that's what it does. It does so much of it. You do get used to all of the quirks and the weird foibles and slightly strange things, and of course driving here in Romania, I've got an Audi right up my tail end, who's desperate, I think, to get past. But we've got a nice bit of road around here. I want to enjoy it because I think a car like this is mostly about the enjoyment, the experience, right? The feeling that you have driving it, the feeling of why it exists, the excitement of the fact that this one managed to escape the factory. It managed to be out there, it managed to find its way into private customer hands, who's invited me to come today to drive it and to share it with you, to share what this is all about, what this car is like to drive, is like to be around. And I think most of these end up locked away in private collections, you know, never to be seen again, because at this price point and needing to have built a bit of a relationship and owning a number of cars with the brand to be able to purchase it in the first place means that, largely speaking, the cars don't do many miles. And I'd love to see this keeping on going, doing loads more, really building up that mileage count, just dropping down to second gear as we curve over the bridge here. It's absolutely ridiculous how much of an event, of an occasion, of a dramatic experience this really is, and that's what it's about. It's not the world's most refined driver's car. It doesn't lap on a racetrack like a GT2 RS or accelerate like an SF90. It's about the experience, the visual and audible and sense of occasion drama that comes with it. And my word, it does that in absolute droves. Accelerating away, taking in all of those 12 cylinders and doing it in style. They are absolutely awesome. You know, this was obviously the end of that era, the ultimate, basically, of the Aventador-based platforms. The new Countach came along and borrowed the same underpinnings, the same technology. But it's amazing to think that this was the first hybrid Lamborghini, the first development prototype of their first series production hybrid vehicle. And I know purists, oh, hybrid batteries, scared, run away. But the supercapacitor system is very different to the traditional hybrids we're seeing now. But not only that, it is the enforced immediate future. It is what is being enforced upon manufacturers, what they have to create, what they have to do. And as such, this was Lamborghini leading the way, really, doing it, you know, back in 2019. It was launched in September 2019 at the IAA, the Frankfurt Motor Show, showing that car in Verde Gia, the satin green paintwork, nicknaming it the FKP 37. And then after this came the development work in 2020, came these cars, or this car, going out to do testing at Nardo, driving at 300 plus, experiencing what the car can do, how it handles, how it drives. And now we're here, or I'm here, lucky to drive this and share this drive with you, to bring you guys along
to experience some of what I'm experiencing today.
On our platform exclusive car registry, you can uncover even more stories about the Lamborghini Few-Off series cars. From the brand new Fenomeno making an appearance with future customer cars to come, all the way back to the early days of the Rebenton and the cars spread around the world. It will come as no surprise that customers did not hold back when choosing their Sian's specifications, and with ad personam, Lamborghini ensured that every car is unique in its own special way. By joining ECR today with a free account, you can not only find out more, but be part of our amazing community of collectors and enthusiasts to build the ultimate resource of these truly spectacular cars.
I'm not gonna lie, there is a small sense of feeling a little bit lost here, driving around roads upon roads across the vineyard without really knowing where I'm going or what I'm doing. But we have permission to be here today, and we have a little speed bump. So we do have a lift system. The front of this is very low, and that splitter really protrudes. But the press of a button, nose goes up, nice and easy, nothing to stress about, no worries at all. I'm gonna keep following it in this direction, use the lift again to go over these little speed bumps. Now, one thing about the supercapacitor system, the way it works, it effectively works under 130 kilometers an hour, so under 81 miles an hour. And the area where it helps with most is pulling away, smoothing out that thing that Lamborghinis were famous for not being the best at with the single clutch gearbox cars, by making it possible to pull away more smoothly, to reverse more smoothly, to just be a little bit more gentle at lower speeds. And you really do feel that versus any of the Aventadors. Of course, the ISR gearbox improved through the generations. The later cars are vastly better than the ones from a decade prior, for example. But ultimately, as we're going to have to work out where to let a car coming towards me go past, I'm going to use the list. Oh, he's just bombing it off-road. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Nice. Ultimately, they've got better, and that's how it works. It's much more power dense than a lithium-ion battery or a different type of battery system. It's much more about being able to regen off the engine, off the brakes, but then use that for a very small discharge to help you where you need. And I'm looking at the chart on the screen in front of me, and I don't think I've really seen it go significantly down from 100%. Of course, we're not on a racetrack, we're not driving at Mach 10, but I haven't really seen that drop down at all. And I think also within the gear shift configuration, it's also operating to help just smoothen and sharpen things that little extra. Now, I have previously driven 2 Lamborghini Sián. Somehow, I find myself driving my third of less than 100 of these that were ever made, which is utterly mind-blowing. But what I found so interesting today, because I've spent a lot more time with it and much more ability to get behind the wheel, is how once you've learned all of these peculiarities in the way that it behaves, it just becomes more comfortable. It just does a little bit more what you want it to and what you expect it to, without you feeling like you're living on the absolute edge. In general, in the cabin, it's super stripped out. Obviously, lots of carbon fiber, and you can see some of these parts are almost weathered from use, right, inside and out. The steering wheel is redone in Alcantara with the 12 o'clock stripe and the contrast stitching. The other things, the seat, as mentioned, this seat is completely brand new. The car has had limited use because it's only been recently reconditioned. It was brought back to life effectively in 2024 and then put through individual approval earlier this year, 2025. So think of this as a car built in 2019 that is the last of the Sians, having only recently actually been registered and delivered to a customer, with the previous owner being Lamborghini. How many, if any, cars are there that were previously owned by Lamborghini themselves and are now out there in public? It's not a lot. This is one of very, very few, if not maybe even, when it comes to the Few-Off hypercars, the only one perhaps that's ever been released. There are some big Lamborghini Few-Off collectors, but I'm not sure if there are any that own any of the prototypes. In this way, the development cars, the cars used to actually help all of the other customer cars be built, be assembled. I tell you what, as we go over some bumps, the ride is actually vastly better than I am familiar with from Lamborghini models. That's another thing that's significantly changed and improved over the years from the first Aventador. But this engine is an evolution of so many great Lamborghini models that came before it. It's gone through the motions, you know, it was in the Murcielago before, of course, it's grown in size since, but fundamentally starting from the very same thing. There is a small delicacy that's needed with pulling away, that sometimes I just have a tendency to stab the throttle a little bit too aggressively rather than waiting patiently for the car to say, yep, I'm ready to go now. And that's where the supercapacitor, again, is doing its thing, and you hear it. I don't know if we've got the AC blasting right now, but I don't know how much of it you can hear on the video. But there's a distinctive different sound, some kind of whizzing going on. Some different noises happening. Now there's a lot of gearbox whine, there's a lot of V12 crackle and burble, but there's something else happening in the background that you're aware of all the time. These are my kind of roads to enjoy. We're in the hills, we've got some twisty tarmac up in front of us, of course surrounded by the vineyards, wine county, wine region near Timisoara, where we're filming today, and I'm having an absolute blast. We'll get some proper throttle in a moment, make the most of that 8,700 or so RPM up to the red line, and in fact just dropping it down. First gear. There's something about these cars, and I don't really get why every time I have such a blast in them, yet for some reason I've never added like an Aventador or something to my own collection. And I guess it's because I see it as a special occasion type of fun, but not the kind of car that I would want to do a road trip with, not to mention there's only a tiny amount of luggage space up front, and that's the same for every car on this platform with the four-wheel drive system. But it's also a lot of work, you know, it's a big, heavy thing. You're aware of that. It's rewarding as a result, but you're certainly conscious that it's a serious thing that you're driving. It's really interesting to look back at the mileage that this car has covered and what it was used for. But before we do that, just take a look for a moment at the views from where we've stopped right now. This is breathtaking, a stunning place to be filming an extraordinary car. So when this was built, of course, at the Lamborghini factory in Italy, for its first 1,500 kilometers or so, that was development and engineers driving it around before it was then used up until it had 3,000 kilometers on the clock for emissions testing. So this is the car that was used for the emissions homologation of the model of the Lamborghini Sián. From 3,000 kilometers onwards to 8,000 kilometers, it then did some extensive running at Nardo. Now, Nardo is a super secret testing facility in Italy for high-speed driving, amongst other things. So this car was then used extensively at speeds over 300 kilometers an hour to determine the top speed, the Vmax of the Sián, and of course discovering that they needed to reinforce that front splitter. From 8,000 kilometers onwards up to just over 47,000, it was used for what the industry calls mileage accumulation. So effectively, normally in Germany, running a lot of different driving in normal environments to try and determine what could go wrong with the car, to pick up on the faults or the potential weaknesses in different components before customers get their hands on them and go and drive them as well. So it now sits with a little over 47,000 kilometers, and what's quite interesting about that is I would hazard a bet that the 47k on this car is more than all of the other Sians in the world if you were to cumulatively accumulate them together, which is quite funny to think. Probably there isn't even another with more than a couple of thousand, let alone 47,000. I'd love to see this on 100k, but I want to touch a little bit more on some of the design as well back here, in particular the way the rear wing works. So you have these permanent end plates that sit vertically. There's a lot of airflow, a lot of air management around here, and then the rear wing is an active aerofoil that moves up, so when you're driving you see it in the rear view mirror. Now I want to come inside though, because I believe if I press the button it will lift that up into position so I can show it to you in a little bit more detail. Press and hold, and that will then raise up out of the rear deck. So you can see how it then goes flush with those end plates either side. So there is another thing to show you back here as well, which, to be honest, is probably even more impressive than the way that boxes and frames off the rear. Although quickly, the tail lights, 3 on each side, another nod to the original Countach, a little like the Periscopio design over the top. These 4 vents here, there's no electronic connection between this engine bay cover and the car's systems. This has a very special, I don't even know what, material that's used that effectively, when it gets hot, opens all of those, and they stay open to allow the cooling and the airflow to come out of the back. That's quite clever.
Not entirely sure how they do it.
Amusingly, because I know I'm going to end up regretting it, for the last bit of drive, I'm going to put it into Corsa mode, and we'll see how this feels. Obviously, Corsa makes the shifts significantly more violent, and it makes the whole experience even crazier than it already was. And I don't know if you could actually say, is this car too loud? Is that a thing? When you put the window down a touch, it's just bonkers, you know? Actually, that wasn't too bad. That is more refined in Corsa than some of the other Aventador models I've driven. I think that is one of the goals of the Sián. It is more of a GT road-orientated focus. It's not a full out-and-out crazy track machine. That wasn't the purpose when they built it. That wasn't the intended use case. That wasn't the intended design and perspective. So Corsa mode's actually pretty decent. That could be far crazier. As the wing rises on the Revuelto in front of us. Actually crackles a lot in Corsa as well. Yeah, this thing's a bit of a mad machine. It feels very, very, very raw, very crazy, and very much about how you feel, about how it makes you feel. That's the purpose. That's what this is built for. And we are back. What a drive and what a sound. Couple of quick little blips. I almost don't want to just go full ham on it because it's a little bit too loud. We didn't, however, really touch on anything else that's here in the collection right now. We probably should quite quickly. McLaren 750S Spider, of course, latest version of McLaren's V8 convertible. Then we have the Revuelto that's been joining us today, over 1,000 horsepower, still maintaining the V12, but now with the full electric hybrid system as well. A very rare Ferrari 488 Pista Pilotti, now only believed to be a few hundred Pilottis. These were only available to order by racing drivers in the Ferrari program, Challenge, GT3, those kinds of things, with the distinct painted livery from the Ferrari tailor-made department. Then, of course, 992 Porsche GT3 RS, car very much at home on the racetrack. As I rather understand, this does get used. Particularly bright Bentley Continental GT V8S. You're not going to miss that when it's coming down the road. Of course, the Speedster that was with us earlier has been taken out. It went to the event. And I think this gives a sense of the variety. We've gone from supercars and hypercar to things that are a little bit different. Over on this side of the garage, we have the two very heavily modified Jeeps. Obviously, you're not going to mess with this thing. Bit of an off-road beastie. Does the talking itself, doesn't it? Then next to it is a Sherp, Ukrainian all-terrain, can do anything vehicle. Haven't really ever, I think, taken one in before. I'm not sure if I've even seen one before, but I love that that is in the same collection as something like this. That's not normal. And as we mentioned earlier, of course, the original prototype wheels, the ones that will run on the car, you can see the marbling on the tires, obviously the wear that they've had over the years. And I think it's quite fun to have this seat in its original unrestored condition, even if it means it's literally got holes in some of the leather. And you can see it's this carbon bucket seat, which for me, it just needs another cushion back here. It needs another pillow to make it a little bit more comfortable. But that's a very nice thing to have on display in a garage, a really cool piece and part of the history, the provenance, the story of this particular machine. But there it is. What a place to be. What a car to drive, and what an amazing story. The car that, like I said, shouldn't really exist. Prototypes get destroyed. They don't make it out there. They don't stick around in the modern era. After so many of these cars have done the different miles and different things that they've done, off they go to the crusher, but not this one. So a huge thank you to the owner for the opportunity to come and visit today, to take it for a drive and to share it with you. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you like cars like this, check out the one right over there. That's it for this time though, and I'll see you again very soon. Cheers.